Does Darren Waller warrant a round 2 pick? Let's break him down right now on Fantasy Football Today in 5. I'm Adam Azer. I'm joined by Jacob Gibbs of Sportsline. So here's where Darren Waller would have finished last year if he had been a wide receiver and a running back. In non-PPR, he would have been wide receiver 10 and RB 13. Half PPR, Waller would have been wide receiver 7 and RB 8. Full PPR, he would have been wide receiver 6 and RB 4. Wow. Unbelievable season for Darren Waller. When would you take him, and then tell us what you like about him?
I'm comfortable taking him in the top 25. I have him quite a ways ahead of George Kittle. So I've ended up getting quite a few Waller shares this year. And like you talked about, I mean, he was super, super productive last year. I think he kind of got overshadowed by Travis Kelce's insane year. But the volume and the productivity was just really off the charts for Waller. He was targeted at the second highest per route rate in the entire NFL. Only Davante Adams drew targets at a higher per route rate. And we saw his target per route rate climb from 24% to 27% in his second season. And so it's really exciting to see. Really what we'll talk about today, each of these points will be highlighting the fact that he's just taken a step forward all across the board. And it's only his second year as a starter. So I think it's possible that we'll continue to see that development in the way that the Raiders use him and the way that, he's added things to his game from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. And so the first point is just that he really was, like, in terms of his ability to draw targets on a per route rate, he was unmatched by anyone but Davante Adams.
That's tremendous. He's clearly the number one target for the Raiders. And, I know one thing you like to see was the way they used him with pre-snap motion. Tell me why that's important.
Yeah, pre-snap motion, it's something that, has become more prevalent in the NFL over the last 5 or 10 years. All the advanced data, points toward it being really good for offensive efficiency, really boosting offensive efficiency. And typically we see, the team's, best playmakers used most heavily in that regard. And we didn't see that much from Waller in his first season. He only had 19 routes used as the pre-snap motion man in his first season. But in his second season, that number jumped all the way up to 63, which was the 8th most in the NFL. Travis Kelce was the only tight end who was used in pre-snap motion more than Waller. And that's particularly exciting for him because he's been targeted on 34% of his routes when used as the pre-snap motion guy throughout his career. And he's averaged 2.7 yards per route run on those routes. And so, the league average goes up, significantly when used in motion, but especially Waller, he's been even better. And so that's really exciting. And it's just another little wrinkle that they've added to his game, just another thing showing that they're continuing to find creative ways to use him more as a playmaker. And I think we'll see more of that in year 3.
Another area that used him more was the red zone. And that was big because, Waller had 9 touchdowns last year. And the year before that, he had, 4? I mean, touchdowns were very low, and he only had 4 targets inside the 10-yard line in 2019, whereas he was 7th in the NFL with 11 targets inside the 10-yard line in 2020. So that was nice to see. And can you buy that sticking, though, going into 2021?
I think so, yeah. It wasn't just the increase in total targets, which he did. I mean, he had more than anyone but Davante Adams in terms of red zone targets. He tripled his targets from inside the 10 from his first year as a starter to his second year. So that's exciting. But then if you also look at the per route run rates, those are really exciting as well. So in his first year as a starter, he was targeted on 25.8% of his routes that came outside of the red zone. And in year 2, that really didn't change much. It was 26.2%. But where we really saw him be more involved was in the red zone. He went up from 15.5% target per route run rate when in the red zone in his first year as a starter, all the way up to 29% in his second season. So he almost doubled that. And he was clearly the highest targeted player for the Raiders. And it makes sense given, everything that he brings as an athletic specimen. He's just humongous. And so I hope we'll continue to see him just dominate the targets in the red zone. And if he's able to do that, then I think you're looking at, one of the best on paper projectable tight ends in the NFL, up there with Travis Kelce. And so just really, really exciting, especially considering we still could have, not seen the best from Waller. We're still in the early stages of his career, even though he is, 28 years old. So I'm super excited to see how they will use him in year 3, what new wrinkles they're going to add to his game.
Last question. The trio of Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. Do you take Waller ahead or after those guys?
It's really tough. I split hairs and have Jefferson just ahead of Waller, and then Waller is actually just before Metcalf and AJ Brown. If you are particularly bullish on either of those other two, I definitely get it. I think you can justify taking them over Waller. But personally, given everything we've talked about today, all the excitement that he brings, and just what an edge he presents you at tight end, I would take him over this other two.
We'll talk about another tight end, Mark Andrews, on tomorrow's episode of